Our city is so war-torn. How can we go out and dress like this and then ride out in our streets feeling safe and feeling community, you know?
Cold, rainy weather didn't stop these people from participating in what they called an emergency naked bike ride, a form of protest against the possibility of the National Guard coming to Portland. More on that coming up. Plus,
this is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death.
the latest on the peace deal between Israel and Hamas as the last surviving hostages in Gaza return to their families. We're also talking about the Broadway Bridge closing down for 6 months starting today. We'll have details on detours in and around downtown Portland. Then later.
High drive right field. Cal Raleigh is connected.
Highlights from the Mariners' big win over the Blue Jays on Sunday as the team gets ready to take another step towards a possible World Series berth this afternoon. KGW News at noon starts right now. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Drew Carney. There were more protests over the weekend near the ICE facility in South Portland in response to the possible deployment of the National Guard and the ongoing work of ICE in the city. Portland police say they didn't make any arrests there last night, though. The weekend protests included what was described as an emergency world naked bike ride. Here's KGW's John Adams with more on that.
Music, costumes, and more outside the ICE facility in Portland on Sunday as people came out to make their voices heard.
Love brings more love. Hate brings more hate. We're here to bring the love.
River Montijo is an organizer with the Portland Raging Grannies, a social justice group that supports immigrant and racial justice.
We came down here to sing peacefully to show ICE and the federal government that we are not rioting, we are not being dangerous, we're just speaking our mind.
Also in attendance, a local brass band dressed as bananas.
What's going on over here at the ICE building is clearly not terrorism, right? I mean, anybody can see this.
Band leader Miles Thompson explains the reasoning behind the costumes.
I think that helps us fight this kind of fascist narrative of everything's burning down and we need to bring in the military.
We also spoke with Holly Brown, who was pulled into the facility and detained during a protest 1 week ago after crossing onto the facility's property.
And I'm out here to show them that we're not afraid and we're going to keep coming out until we get this building shut down, we get ICE out of Portland.
Rain showers didn't stop participants in an emergency world naked bike ride from passing by the facility. Organizers say the ride is meant to push back on the possible militarization of Portland.
John Adams, KGW News.
Life flights had to be canceled. Life flights to OHSU. They were on pause on Saturday because of a flyer that reportedly called on people to shine lasers at police helicopters flying above the ICE facility. So instead of life flighting patients directly to OHSU, helicopters had to land at nearby airports, and then ambulances transported patients to the hospital. OHSU says that process could add up to an hour to patient transport time. OHSU also said its helicopter vendors were choosing to avoid the airspace near the ICE facility. It wasn't the hospital's call. Portland police want to remind people that pointing lasers at planes or helicopters is against both state and federal law. We're still waiting for a ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on whether or not President Trump can legally deploy the National Guard to Portland. Meanwhile, in the Midwest, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that members of the National Guard in Illinois can remain federalized, but they cannot be deployed in the state while the appeals process continues to play out.
Staying the part about nationalization, but not staying the TRO as it relates to deployment is sort of the middle ground. If they were to stay the TRO completely, then that means the troops could be deployed right away.
TRO standing for Temporary Restraining Order. District judges in Chicago and here in Portland have recently issued temporary restraining orders that block the deployment of National Guard troops to both cities. Oregon and Washington are part of a group of states joining Illinois in its legal battle to stop the National Guard's deployment to Chicago. Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield and Washington Attorney General Nick Brown, along with nearly 24 other AGs around the country, filed a brief in the Seventh Court of Appeals, arguing that the Trump administration's deployment of National Guard members to Chicago is against the law. Stay with KGW for the latest. surrounding Portland's ICE facility and the deployment of the National Guard to the city. We'll bring you updates here on the air at KGW.com and on our free TV streaming app, KGW+. All right, a break from our news headlines here for a check-in with Rod Hill in the Weather Center. What are we looking at there, Rod?
You know, today's kind of a credit to modern meteorology because this morning, think about it, it was cloudy. We still had some rainy areas, including Salem. We had kind of light northwest winds. And then we said by noon it would be sunny, east winds would be blowing, and all of that has happened exactly on schedule, not because of my genius, but just following along with the modeling was indicating for a roadmap today. So we've got the rain that's kind of dissolved and actually dropped south out of our area. We have clear skies from Salem up into Portland. Here's the east wind that we thought would come to life quickly, gusting currently to 30 miles per hour along the Columbia River. You get more into the West Gorge and you find 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So that's a possibility for you folks in East Multnomah County this afternoon as well. Here's Timberline. One of our big headlines today is the 15 inches. That's right. 15 inches of snow that fell up there yesterday and last night, ending early this morning. It's 30 degrees. There's east winds gusting to 36, so that's chilly up at the lodge. And here's the other look. You can see the trees moving as we're looking south from Timberline. The coast is clear, as the saying goes. Chinook Winds Casino Resort in Lincoln City. There's downtown Portland from the Portland Spirit Landing. Beautiful clear sky day. We are currently in the low 50s. This shows us hitting 60 at 4 p.m. and then cooling down after that. A lot of you, I feel, will be in the 30s overnight tonight. More on chilly nights coming in my complete forecast.
All right, thank you for that, Rob. We'll see you in a few minutes. Meanwhile, the Broadway Bridge closed this morning, and it's going to stay closed for the next 6 months. KGW's Devin Haskins has more on the work that's being done and how it will impact traffic in and around downtown Portland.
The closure is part of a $28 million project to replace the deck surface. That's the part that you drive on. With more than 19,000 cars that drive across this bridge every day, the county says it's time for it to be replaced. It was installed 20 years ago and it's lived its life. This closure will have a big impact on traffic here in Portland. It'll be closed off to all vehicles, buses, and the Portland streetcar till April. One of the sidewalks will stay open most of the time for people walking or biking across. And on top of the usual commute traffic, don't forget big events still happening at the Moda Center or the Coliseum will also mean other crossings will be much busier. Now, if you take TriMet or the streetcar across, those are being detoured. The streetcar will detour across Tillicum Crossing, and TriMet's Bus Line 17 will detour across the Steel Bridge. Again, one of those many crossings that you can use to get across, but just keep in mind, those crossings will also be very busy with all those other cars trying to get around the Broadway Bridge. This bridge will remain closed until about mid-April. In North Portland, I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.
In other local headlines, police identified the woman who was found dead in her car with a gunshot wound in Northwest Portland over the weekend. She's 39-year-old Crystal Pendergraft. Again, 39-year-old Crystal Pendergraft. Officers were called to a welfare check at Northwest 22nd and Kearney just after 5 o'clock Saturday evening. That's where they say they found Pendergraft in her car and pronounced her dead at the scene. Anyone with information about her death should contact Portland Police. Police are also investigating a shooting in Northeast Portland near 24th and Killingsworth. Investigators taped off a section of Northeast 24th to keep people away from that car right there that was riddled with bullet holes. Police say officers responded to the area early Sunday morning, right around 3:30. They also say the victim walked themselves to a nearby hospital and is expected to survive. A former Westland doctor turned himself into the Clackamas County Jail after a grand jury indicted him on sex abuse charges. During his first court appearance last week, David Farley pleaded not guilty. Multiple women have accused Farley of unwanted sexual contact during what should have been routine doctor exams over the years. The judge set Farley's bail at $500,000.